The first time Jake Carter stepped into the chamber of Outpost Helix, he felt hundreds of eyes on him. The room was wide and bright, with smooth metal walls that curved like the inside of a bowl. Soft blue lights glowed from hidden panels. The air smelled faintly of cleaned metal and something sharp, like ozone after a storm. Rows of alien officials sat on raised platforms that circled the chamber. Some had long, thin necks and pale, glassy skin. Some had many eyes that blinked in slow, careful patterns. Some had soft fur that changed color when they whispered to one another. Above them all, near the top row, the main council members watched him in silence. Jake stood alone on the central platform. There was no rail around it, no podium, no table. It was just him and the empty floor like a stage. He could feel the low hum of the outpost under his boots, a faint vibration that never fully stopped. He kept his hands loose at his sides. His breathing was slow and even. Outside, beyond the thick walls, the cold black of space pressed against the station. Inside, the council waited. The translation field shimmered around him, a faint ring of light at his feet. It would catch his words, change them into sounds the aliens could understand, and do the same for their speech. He had used many such devices before. By now, it felt almost normal. A small movement at the right edge of the chamber caught his eye. A slim alien with smooth violet skin stepped forward from a side alcove, holding a thin tablet that glowed with changing symbols. Her large, dark eyes studied him with intense focus. This was Lyra, the lead of the outpost. She was known for her calm, careful judgment and for asking questions that made even admirals sweat. Jake had read her file. She had spent 20 standard years studying humans from a distance. She knew their biology better than most humans knew their own. She walked down a narrow ramp and stopped a few meters from him. The tablet in her hand cast a pale light over her face. "Human Jake Carter," the translation field said in a clear, neutral voice matching her soft speech. "We have completed our scans. There is a problem." The murmurs around the chamber grew louder, many eyes fixed on Jake's neck. He could feel it like a physical pressure. He did not move. "A problem," he repeated, his own words turning into a gentle ripple of sounds in their language. "Please explain." Lyra tapped the tablet. A faint image appeared in the air above it. It showed a close view of his neck and the upper part of his chest, taken from the medical scanners. The picture slowly rotated, revealing every angle. The council leaned forward. In the image, they could see the short, dark hair that grew along his jaw and throat. Human stubble. It was nothing special to him, just a reminder that he had missed his last shave. But the aliens were not staring at the hair itself. They were staring at the faint, glowing lines that seemed to appear under his skin whenever the hair was present. The lines wrapped around his neck like a thin, broken collar. They joined and split, making an uneven pattern that pulsed with a soft inner light. He knew what they were. Of course he knew, but he had not expected them to show so clearly on the scans. "These patterns," Lyra said, pointing with a long, graceful finger, "they are not part of the standard human model. They are something else, something fused with your tissue." Jake's expression did not change. "Yes. Our models show an extreme reaction if the hair around them is removed." Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly. "If the area is shaved." A low sound rolled through the chamber, like a distant storm. Some of the council members turned to each other, their colors flickering in concern. Jake let the silence stretch. He knew better than to rush this part. "What kind of reaction?" he asked. "The scan predicts a catastrophic energy release," Lyra answered. Her voice was still calm, but there was tightness in it now. "Your cells respond as if they are tied to a dormant field. The field is folded into the scars we detected under the hair." She slid to the next image. The close view of his neck vanished, replaced by a complex network of glowing lines. They wrapped around a model of his body like a web of lightning. "This is the projected activation pattern," she said. "Our calculations show lethal levels of radiation within a small radius. The force continues to rise outward. It does not stop at the human body." A High Council member, a tall being with a floating crown of thin, glass-like spines, spoke from above. "Clarify," the translation field said in solemn tones. "Does this projection indicate harm only to the human host or to those near him as well?" Lyra tilted her head. "To everyone, host and bystanders. The field crosses all known biobarriers." The crown of spines dimmed. Several council members drew back from the edge of their platforms, as if Jake might suddenly erupt. Jake stayed still. Inside, he felt an old, familiar weight settle in his chest. It was not fear. It was something more worn, more tired. The feeling of a man who had carried the same burden for too long. "So if I shave," he said slowly, "I die." "And anyone close to you," Lyra said. "Perhaps the entire outpost, perhaps more." Jake let out a small breath. "Then it is best if I do not shave." The simple answer did not calm them. "This is not a minor health note," another council member said sharply. This one had a circular torso and 4 arms that curled inward like branches. "This is a threat to every species present. Humanity did not declare this risk when requesting an envoy." Jake turned his head just enough to look up toward the speaker. "Humanity did not request an envoy," he said. "You requested a meeting with someone who had seen war up close and survived it." The room fell quieter. From one of the side platforms, a human uniform caught the light. Commander Aaron Miles stood there, arms folded behind his back. His dark hair was cut short. A thin scar ran along his jaw, stopping just short of his ear. He was one of the few humans permanently assigned to Outpost Helix. He watched Jake with narrowed eyes. He had not spoken yet, but there was tension in his shoulders. He had seen something in those images, something that would not let him relax. On a lower row, near the rear, another human leaned forward on the rail. Brooks, a young diplomat with neat brown hair pulled back into a simple tie, studied the glowing lines on the display. Her lips pressed together as she tried to follow the patterns. She did not know all the details. She did not have the clearance, but she had seen hints in old files, half hid behind redacted blocks of text. Lyra stepped a little closer to Jake. "I must ask directly," she said. "What are these marks? What have your people done to you?" Jake looked at her. Her eyes were wide but steady. She deserved an answer, he thought. The council deserved one as well, even if they would not like what they heard. He raised one hand very slowly. The chamber lights reacted to the motion, brightening near him as if expecting a sudden move. A few council members flinched. He only took hold of his collar. The fabric of his uniform was dark and simple, with a high neck that covered most of his throat. The collar lay close to the skin, hiding anything beneath it. He curled his fingers under the edge. Lyra's crest flickered with alarm. "Wait," she said. "Our projections show that any disruption to the area may cause a reaction. If you adjust the cover too much, it could." "It will not," Jake said quietly. "I know where the safe line is." His voice was soft but absolute. Something in it made even the most fearful council members pause. He began to pull the collar downward. The room held its breath. The hum of the outpost seemed louder in the silence. Hands tightened on the rail. Aaron leaned forward without realizing it. The dark fabric slid away from Jake's neck. At first they saw only skin, pale from long months in space, the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw and throat. Then the light caught on the real marks. A thin line of scars, almost invisible when relaxed, brightened under the chamber's glow. They formed a broken ring around his neck, each segment shaped like a jagged arc. Some were short and sharp. Some were long curves that seemed to sink deeper into his skin. As he pulled the collar lower, more lines showed across the top of his chest. They crossed and joined like paths in a strange map. The lines were not flat. They had depth, as if something had been burned into him and then healed over and over until skin and mark were one. And from inside them, a faint light pulsed. It was not strong enough to light the room. It was just enough to make the scars look like thin, quiet lightning frozen in flesh. Gasps echoed from the rows above. A few beings covered their sensory organs. Others leaned so far forward their attendants had to pull them back. His breath caught. She had seen these marks once before, in a single classified image that she had not been allowed to keep. The file had called them restraint sigils. She had thought it was some old myth. Aaron knew better. He had seen the full archive. He knew how those sigils were made. Lyra stared at the scars, her pupils expanding. The tablet in her hand began to show new data as it read the changing energy around Jake's body. "The patterns are fused with nerve tissue," she whispered. The translation field carried her words to every corner of the chamber. "They are integrated with each cell layer. There is an underlying field signature we have never recorded before." Jake let his collar rest just below the lowest visible mark. He did not expose more than he needed to. The air on the bare skin felt cool after so long. "These are not medical treatments," Lyra said slowly. "They are not natural scars. They were placed with precision. What are they?" Jake looked up at the sea of eyes watching him. He could see fear there, yes, but also sharp curiosity, and in a few faces something like respect. "They are a promise," he said, "and a warning." The council waited. "A promise to whom?" the high member with the glass-like spines asked. "To everyone who is still alive because of them," Jake replied. The silence grew heavier. Aaron's voice finally cut through it. "He is linked to an old program," he said, speaking for the first time. "A weapons project humanity shut down years ago. You will find the name in your archives under restricted war records." Several alien officials pulled up their own displays, searching through shared data. Symbols flickered across the air as they tried to access files that did not fully open. "The project was marked as terminated," one of them said in confusion. "No active units remain." Aaron's eyes stayed on Jake. "That was the hope," he said, "but some things are not so simple to end." Watched the exchange with a tightening knot in her stomach. She had heard rumors about those programs from older officers who spoke only when tired and half asleep. Stories of soldiers who carried weapons inside their own bodies, turned into walking storm centers. She had always thought they were exaggerated, maybe not. Lyra raised the tablet higher, letting it scan Jake's exposed scars again. "The projected field spread is not stable," she said. "It spikes in strange patterns, as if tied to emotional and physical triggers." Jake gave a small, dry smile. "You could say that." She looked from the tablet to his face. "What happens if you are injured in that area, or if someone tries to remove the marks?" Jake held her gaze. "Then your projection becomes real." The words were simple, but the meaning landed like a heavy object dropped into still water. Waves of unease moved through the chamber. Lyra's crest dimmed. "Then the warning must be formal," she said. "Human Jake Carter, you are not allowed to enter any shared medical facility without full containment protocols. No medical staff is allowed to shave or cut the hair around your neck or upper chest. Any attempt to do so will be treated as a direct breach of safety." She took a breath she did not need, copying the human habit. "In short, if you shave, you are dead, and so might be many others." The translation field repeated her words, ringing them out with clear emphasis. Jake let his hand fall from his collar. Slowly, he raised the fabric again and covered the glowing sigils, hiding the quiet light under dark cloth. When the last scar disappeared, the tension in the room eased slightly, but not much. He smoothed the collar with 2 fingers and looked up at the council. "Understood," he said. "I will remain unshaven." The simple statement sounded almost like a joke, but no one laughed. From the back row studied his face. There was no pride there, no attempt to impress or intimidate, only a calm acceptance, as if he had long ago made peace with whatever lived in his skin. She wondered how many times he had wanted to be rid of it, how many times he had reached for a razor before remembering what he carried. The council leader with the glass-like spines shifted in his seat. "Human Jake Carter," he said, "why did you not tell us about this before coming here?" Jake looked steadily up at him. "Because if I had," he said, "you would have refused the meeting, and we need to talk." All eyes remained fixed on the human in the center of the chamber, on the place where the scars were hidden, on the man who could not safely shave. They had wanted to see a simple envoy. Instead, they had seen the edges of something much larger. And for the first time, many of them began to understand why humans spoke of restraint as if it were a sacred word. After the meeting ended, Jake Carter walked through the wide halls of Outpost Helix with slow and careful steps. The lights above followed him in soft white lines, and the floor made a quiet echo under his boots. The station felt calm, yet something heavy stayed in the air. The news had already spread. He could feel it in the way others looked at him. Some aliens moved aside as he passed, their bodies stiff with unease. Others paused and stared openly, their eyes wide and bright with fear and wonder. A few whispered in their own strange sounds, careful not to let their voices carry too loudly. Jake kept his gaze forward. He did not let his shoulders tense. He had known this would happen. He had lived through worse than curious stares. Commander Aaron Miles walked a few steps behind him. He had been quiet since the chamber session ended. But now, as they turned into a quieter corridor, he spoke. "They ran your marks through every archive we have," Aaron said. "Some of them are asking questions that were buried years ago." Jake gave a small nod. That was always going to happen. "You could have warned them before showing it like that," Aaron added. "Half the council thinks you are a walking bomb." Jake stopped and glanced back. "I am," he said simply. Aaron did not argue. He only sighed and looked away for a moment. They reached a sealed door marked with human symbols. Jake placed his hand on the scanner and the panel glowed green. The door slid open, revealing a quiet private room. It was small but clean, with a simple bed, a desk, and a narrow view screen that showed the deep stars outside. "This is your assigned space," Aaron said. "Security will be higher now, just so you know." Jake stepped inside and looked around. It felt no different from a dozen other rooms he had slept in across different systems. He put a small bag on the floor and turned back. "Thanks," he said. Aaron leaned in the doorway. "You should rest. Tomorrow the council wants more answers." Jake smiled faintly. "They always do." The door slid shut, and the soft lock sealed with a gentle click. For a moment he stood alone in silence. He reached up and brushed his fingers lightly over his collar. He did not pull it down this time. He only felt the faint warmth under the fabric, the slow pulse he had grown used to over the years. His reflection in the narrow mirror showed tired eyes and a face marked by time and stress. He looked normal, almost too normal for what lived under his skin. He sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled slowly. Far away in another section of the station, Brooke sat at her own desk, scrolling through restricted files. Her command code allowed limited access, but even that was enough to make her stomach tighten. Images of old battlefields flashed across the screen, burned ships, silent planets, rows of dark shapes drifting in empty space. And then she saw familiar marks. They matched the faint pattern she had seen glowing on Jake's neck. A file opened that had been hidden under several layers of warning. The words were simple but cold. Human restraint integration trial subjects. Phase 1 only. Survivors listed below. There was only one name not crossed out. Jake Carter. Her breath slowed as she stared at the screen. "What did they turn you into?" she whispered. Back in his room, Jake lay down and closed his eyes, but sleep did not come easily. Old memories pushed forward, sharp and heavy. He remembered white rooms, bright lights, cold metal under his back. He remembered voices speaking calmly as if discussing simple tools, not human lives. He remembered the slow heat tracing lines into his neck and chest, fire so deep it felt like the soul itself was being carved. He remembered the first time the marks activated, the way the air vibrated, the way the ground cracked, the way the sky lit up like it was breaking open. He turned on his side, forcing the thoughts away. A soft tone filled the room. The door panel glowed faintly. "Enter," he said. The door slid open and stood there looking unsure. Her hands were clasped in front of her, and her eyes searched his face. "Sorry," she said gently. "I know this is late, but I needed to see you." Jake pushed himself up and gestured for her to come in. "It's fine." She stepped inside and glanced toward the corridor before the door closed again. "I looked at the archives," she said quietly. "I know they hide things, but this was deeper than usual." Jake nodded once. "You were not meant to see those files." "I figured," she replied, "but I'm glad I did." She hesitated, then spoke again. "They called you a trial subject. They said you were supposed to be dead." "I was more than once," he said softly, "but the program needed one living proof." His eyes lowered to his collar. "And now the aliens think you are a threat." Jake leaned back against the wall. "They are not wrong." "But you're not here to hurt them," she said quickly. "You're here because you want peace. You said that in your proposal." He studied her face. "Yes, I am here because I want peace." "Then why carry that power at all?" she asked. "Why not remove it somehow?" Jake let out a slow breath. "Because removing it is the same as letting it loose. There is no off switch, only control." A quiet moment passed between them. In another wing of the station, Lyra stood with a group of senior science officers of various species. Holographic screens surrounded them, each one showing scans of Jake's body, energy patterns, and predicted outcomes. "His field signature does not follow known physics," Lyra said. "It bends around solid matter as if searching for an enemy." One of the older scientists clicked his mandibles with unease. "Then why does it sleep?" "Because he sleeps," she answered. "The system seems linked to his nervous state. His calm is the lock." "And if he loses that calm?" another asked. Lyra did not reply at once. She did not like the answer. The next morning the council chamber filled again. But this time the seats were farther from the central platform. The air field around Jake was stronger. Silent drones floated near the walls, ready to react if needed. Jake walked in alone once more, his posture steady, his collar neat and high. The session began with a series of careful questions. They asked about the creation of the marks, about the war that led to the program, about the control methods used to keep the energy silent. Jake answered each one with calm honesty. He spoke of ruined colonies and desperate leaders. He spoke of scientists who believed control was better than extinction. He spoke of soldiers who volunteered, thinking it would make them heroes. Most of them died. He spoke of how he had survived by learning to breathe slowly, to keep his heartbeat even, to never let anger take full hold. "As long as I remain stable, the system remains dormant," he said. "As long as the seals remain untouched, the output stays contained." Lyra studied him carefully. "And what do you require to remain stable?" "Space," he said, "time and trust." Murmurs rolled through the chamber. One alien leaned forward, its skin shifting a pale gray. "You admit that your emotions control a weapon capable of destroying this station. How can we feel safe near you?" Jake met its gaze. "You cannot," he said plainly. "You can only decide if the risk is worth the peace we are trying to build." That truth sat heavily in the air. Later, after the session was dismissed, Jake stood in a narrow observation hall overlooking a ring of stars. The glass was thick and slightly tinted, giving space a soft blue shade. He felt someone come beside him. It was Lyra. She kept her hands folded in front of her body, her eyes calm but sharp. "You cooperated fully," she said. "That is rare for humans in dangerous positions." "I do not like secrets," Jake replied. "They grow teeth." She tilted her head. "Your restraint is impressive, but our concern remains. If your emotional state weakens, we all suffer." He looked out at the endless dark. "That is why I am here," he said, "to prove that control is stronger than fear." Behind them, watched from a distance, uneasy but hopeful, Aaron stood further back, arms crossed, still wary. Jake felt the faint pulse under his shirt again, slow and steady, like a quiet heart that did not belong to him alone. He knew the calm would not last forever. Something would test it. It always did. But for now, he held the line, and the station continued to breathe in silent peace. The station seemed calm on the surface, but tension lived in every quiet sound and every careful movement. Jake Carter felt it in the way footsteps paused when he walked by, and in the way conversations stopped when he entered a room. People smiled at him, but their eyes were always watching his collar, as if waiting to see if light would suddenly break free. He tried to keep his routine simple. Each morning he walked the outer ring corridor where the stars looked close enough to touch. He focused on steady breathing, on the soft rhythm of his steps, on keeping his body and mind still. Stability was not a choice. It was survival. Often joined him during these walks. She never stood too close, but she also did not keep the full distance others chose. Her presence was quiet and careful, like someone trying to learn the shape of a storm without stepping inside it. "You ever get tired of people staring at your neck?" she asked one morning, keeping her eyes forward instead of looking at the marks she could not see. He gave a faint smile. "I stopped noticing years ago." "That's not the same as not feeling it," she said. He considered that. "No," he admitted, "it is." As they walked, a group of alien technicians passed by. Their skin shifted a light nervous green when they saw him. One of them whispered something and the others nodded. Jake did not react, glanced at them and then back at him. "They don't understand yet," she said softly. "They think control is a lie." He looked ahead at the curve of the glass and the slow turn of a distant planet. "They will either learn," he said, "or they will decide fear is easier." In the central command wing, Aaron watched live feeds from the security systems. He could see Jake's location marked with a gentle blip that moved across the station map. Additional containment fields were listed nearby, along with a set of emergency protocols that made his jaw tighten every time he read them. Protocol Red Dusk. Controlled neutralization of subject if instability reaches critical level. He hated those words. Controlled neutralization. It sounded so clean, so simple. He knew better. He had seen what happened when Jake lost control even for seconds. His memory drifted back to an old battle site, a dark sky filled with broken ships and burning clouds. He remembered Jake standing alone on cracked ground, the marks blazing bright, the air screaming with power. He remembered the moment when Jake had fallen to his knees, gasping, barely holding it back. Aaron shook the thought away and focused on the present. A sudden tone cut through the silence. An alert symbol flashed on the panel. Sector 4 Medical Wing, unauthorized access. His eyes sharpened. He tapped the control and pulled up a video feed. In a narrow white hallway, two figures moved quickly toward the restricted medical bay. Their forms were partially hidden by maintenance clothing, but their movements were sharp and urgent, not the slow, careful pace of normal staff. Aaron's pulse rose. "Security," he said into the comm. "Track those two and do not let them near Carter." Across the station, Jake reached a junction point where the corridor branched toward the research sectors. Jake felt a strange flicker under his skin. Not pain, Not heat, just a thin sense of unease that crawled up his spine. He stopped walking. Noticed, what is it? Something is wrong, he said quietly. Far above them, Lyra stood in her lab, her attention fixed on a pulsing display that showed Jake's emotional and energy patterns in real time. She watched a thin line rise slightly above its normal level. "This is not natural fluctuation," she murmured. The station's voice system chimed softly. Unregistered movement detected near subject zone. Her crest darkened with alarm. "Send all available units, now." Back in the corridor, the sound of hurried footsteps grew closer. Jake turned slowly, placing himself just slightly in front of without even thinking about it. Two humans rounded the corner. Their faces were tense. One of them held a small metallic device with a glowing edge. The other carried a compact medical case. "Jake Carter," the first one said, breath tight. "We need you to come with us, now." Frowned, "Who authorized this?" The man avoided her eyes. "Emergency directive, medical override." Jake stayed calm, but the faint pressure under his collar sharpened, like a quiet drum starting to beat faster. "What kind of emergency?" Jake asked. The second man opened the case, revealing tools and a sealed sterilization kit. A small handheld razor lay inside, its surface clean and sharp. Stared at it. "You can't be serious." "We are," the man said. "Your condition is too dangerous to leave untreated. The marks must be removed or stabilized directly. Hair interference is blocking full analysis." Jake's eyes dropped to the razor. He did not move, but the air around him seemed now. Lyra's voice burst through the corridor speakers. "Do not touch the subject. Repeat, do not touch the subject." The two men hesitated, but only for a moment. "This risk must be handled," the one with the device insisted. "We are under special order." Stepped in front of them. "You're about to kill everyone on this level," she said. "Put that away." They did not listen. And that was when Jake felt the shift inside him. Not fear, not anger, but a deep, heavy memory pulling at the edges of his calm. The faint pulse beneath his skin grew warmer. His breathing became slower, but the stillness felt strained, like glass under pressure. "Step back," he said, voice low. One of the men reached forward anyway. A thin line of light appeared at the edge of Jake's collar. His eyes widened. "Jake." The air trembled, almost too gently at first to notice. A soft vibration passed through the floor, through the walls, through the bones of everyone nearby. Aaron's voice thundered through the station comm. "All personnel clear level immediately. Repeat, clear level." Jake closed his eyes for a split second, fighting the memory of burning skis and shattered ground. He forced his thoughts into focus. Slow, calm, controlled. The man with the razor froze as the light under Jake's fabric brightened, casting thin streaks through the seams. "You don't understand," Jake said. "If you touch this, I lose the lock." But the device in the man's hand was already humming. The vibration grew stronger. The walls emitted a low sound like distant thunder. Stepped back slowly, heart racing. She could feel heat in the air now, dry and sharp. Lyra's lab lights flickered as energy readings spiked off every known scale. "He is destabilizing," she whispered. "He is trying to hold it back." Jake opened his eyes. The calm in them was forced but still there, like a thin shield against a rising wave. "Leave," he said, "now." One of the men finally backed away, fear flooding his face. But the other hesitated, still gripping the device, as if logic could somehow overcome the clear danger in front of him. That hesitation was enough for the marks to answer. The light under Jake's collar surged, bright but not wild. It flowed like a controlled current, expanding in a thin halo around his neck and upper chest. The air crackled softly, and the temperature shifted, cool and warm at the same time. Every sensor on the station screamed in silent alerts. Jake drew in one long breath and slowly released it. His hands hung loose at his sides, fingers trembling just slightly. Watched in disbelief as the glow steadied instead of bursting. It hovered, restrained, pressing at invisible boundaries, yet refusing to break free. Aaron arrived with a team of guards at the far end of the hall. He stopped when he saw the light, his eyes locking onto Jake. "Stand down," he ordered. "Everyone stand down." The man with the razor dropped the tool. It clattered against the floor and slid away, harmless now. Jake's breathing evened out one slow cycle at a time. The glow softened. The vibration weakened. The pulse retreated, folding itself back beneath skin and cloth like a beast forced back into sleep. After several long seconds, silence returned. Only then did Jake open his eyes fully. The corridor looked the same. The lights glowed steady again, but everyone felt the difference, like the echo after a near strike. "Swallowed, you held it," she said, voice shaking. He gave a tired nod, barely. Lyra's voice filled the speakers once more, softer now. Subject stability returning to baseline. Keep all sharp instruments away from his body. Aaron approached carefully. "Are you okay?" Jake closed his eyes briefly. "I will be." The two men who had tried to intervene stood pale and shaken, realizing what they had almost done. Jake did not shout at them. He did not threaten them. He simply looked at them with a deep sadness. "You wanted to fix me," he said quietly. "You almost turned this place into dust." They had no answer. Later, in the quiet of his room, Jake sat on the edge of his bed, sweat cooling on his skin. He could still feel the echo of power under his collar, restless but contained. Sat nearby, hands resting on her knees. She had followed him there in silence after the incident. "You scared them today," she said gently. "I scared myself," he replied. "But you controlled it," she said. "That's the part they need to see." He looked down at his hands. "Control is not strength," he said. "It's constant effort." Outside the window, the stars moved slowly in endless quiet. He knew this was only the beginning. The test had started, and the galaxy was watching to see if the human who could not shave would also be the human who could not break. The station had changed after the incident in the corridor. Everyone felt it, even those far from the danger. Conversations were softer. Movements were slower. The air itself seemed careful, as if the metal walls had learned to be afraid. Jake Carter stayed mostly in his room for the next day, not because he was ordered to, but because he knew rest was the best way to regain control. His body still felt heavy, and the faint pulse under his collar had not fully settled. It was like a quiet storm waiting beyond a thin door. Checked on him often. She brought simple food and stood by the window with him, watching the distant stars drift in slow silence. "They're calling an emergency summit," she said one evening. "All senior council members. They want a final decision." Jake nodded. "I figured they would." "You think they'll send you away?" she asked. "Maybe," he replied. "Or maybe they'll decide I'm too useful to lose." She frowned. "You're not a tool." He gave a faint smile. "In war, everyone becomes one. Some are just sharper than others." Far across the station, the council chamber filled for a third time. But now there was no curiosity in the air, only judgment. Lyra stood at her main platform, surrounded by data projections and energy charts. Beside her, the highest-ranking representatives of each species gathered, forming a wide arc around an empty central floor. Jake entered alone, walking with the same calm steps as before. No guards, no weapons, no shields, just a man with a quiet storm under his skin. He stopped in the center and waited. The leader with the glass-like spine spoke first. "Human Jake Carter, the recent event has confirmed our greatest fears. Your presence places this entire station at risk." Jake did not argue, he simply listened. "We have reviewed all available data," the leader continued. Your ability to restrain this energy is impressive, but it is not guaranteed. You admit this yourself." "Yes," Jake said, "I do." Another council member leaned forward. "Then why should we keep you here? Why should we not remove you to a distant location where your failure will harm no one?" Jake raised his eyes to meet the many faces around him. "Because fear does not create peace," he said calmly. "You asked for a human who understands war. That is who I am. Not just the power you see, but the control behind it." Soft murmurs moved through the chamber. Lyra stepped slightly closer. "Your words are strong, but your body carries a system that could erase this place. What assurance can you give us?" Jake was silent for a moment. Then he slowly moved his hand toward his collar. Alarms flickered across the edges of the room, but did not sound yet. "Do not reveal the seals again," the leader warned. "It destabilizes our readings." Jake paused, fingers resting lightly against the fabric, but he did not pull it down. "You fear what you see," he said instead, "but you have not yet seen the true choice behind it." He lowered his hand again. "I can leave," he continued. "I can take this danger far from your worlds. I have done that before, many times. Each time another frontier opened. Another conflict found me. Another innocent place became a battlefield." He glanced around the chamber. "If I go, I do not disappear. I only move the storm closer to someone else." The room stayed still. "But if I stay," he said, "you learn that even the worst weapon created by humanity can choose restraint." A long pause followed. From the back of the chamber, watched quietly, Aaron stood near the side, his expression hard but thoughtful. The council leader spoke again. "You ask us to trust what we cannot control." Jake gave a slow nod. "That is what peace always asks." The council entered a private discussion, their voices muted to others by the station's systems. Light rippled along the upper edges of the chamber as data flowed between them. Jake stood still, hands folded loosely at his sides, breathing steady. He did not look hostile. He did not look desperate either, only tired, like someone who had carried too much for too long and learned not to beg. Finally, the leader turned back toward him. "We will not send you away," it said, "but your presence will remain under strict agreement. You will not be subjected to further physical testing. No attempts to alter or remove the seals will be permitted." Jake inclined his head slightly. "Understood." "In return," the leader continued, "you will continue to serve as envoy and advisor. You will teach us, not through fear, but through discipline. And you will allow our scientists to monitor your condition from a safe distance." He gave a faint breath of relief. "That is fair." "And if you lose control," another member pressed. Jake did not hide from the question. "Then I will accept whatever action you choose to stop me." The honesty left a heavy silence behind it. The summit ended soon after. Outside the chamber approached him with cautious relief. "They kept you," she said. "For now," he replied. "Are you glad?" He looked down the curved hallway that led back toward the living quarters. "I don't know if glad is the word," he said, "but it feels right." Days passed, and slowly the station returned to its normal rhythm. Fear did not vanish, but it softened. Some aliens began to greet Jake with careful respect instead of open avoidance. A few even thanked him for what he represented. Lyra continued her observations, no longer from pure fear, but from deep scientific interest. She often spoke with Jake through secure channels, asking about the early days of the program, about the way control was taught, about the moments when it had almost failed. He answered patiently. He did not hide the pain. He did not glorify it either. One quiet night, Jake stood alone in the observation corridor once more. The stars outside seemed endless, calm, untouched by the chaos humans carried into the dark. Joined him silently. "You ever think about what your life would have been without those marks?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "All the time," And he gave a small shrug. It would have been easier, quieter, probably shorter. She looked up at him. You don't regret surviving? He shook his head. No, I regret the world that needed me to survive like this. The faint pulse under his collar stirred again, gentle and slow, like a reminder of everything that had happened and everything still waiting. Across the galaxy, word of the human with the sealed storm spread through trade routes and data streams. Some called him a monster, some called him a miracle, most simply called him a warning. But on Outpost Helix, he was something else. He was the man who stood in the center of fear and did not let it rule him. And as the station lights dimmed to simulation night, Jake Carter remained where he was, breathing evenly, holding the line between disaster and peace, proving with every quiet moment that the greatest power humanity had ever built was not destruction, but choice.